Welcome back to Speducation. I am your host, Brandon Reed, and as always, if this is your first time to the channel, a special welcome to you. Well, it's a new week and we have a new lesson. So, what are we going to be learning about today? Well, let's find out. Today's lesson, types of case conferences, initial and reevaluation. So at the beginning of this channel, I did a series on parts of an IEP, and one of the parts of the IEP was talking about the types of case conferences that are done. And I did mention the different types of case conferences, but I didn't go into detail. So over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about the different types of case conferences. And this week, we're going to be looking at initials and reevaluations and what they are. So what is an initial case conference? Well, the initial case conference is a conference in which the school, as well as the parents, meet to determine eligibility, describe the program and services to meet students' needs, and develop a complete and compliant IEP if eligible. Now, you're probably wondering, how does a parent go about getting an initial case conference? Well, you can go to the school directly and request one, and the school has to comply with your request, although they may make some suggestions. One suggestion is an RTI, a response to intervention. If they speak with the parent and acknowledge that there are some concerns and issues in regards to your student's education and their performance, then the RTI, response to intervention, would provide some intervention resources to help the student be successful. If after a given amount of time, those response to interventions aren't successful, then the school can move forward with initial testing and then an initial case conference. But if the parent says, no, I don't want that, I just want special ed testing to determine if my child does require a special education IEP, then the school must comply. And they have 50 days to do the initial testing, find the results, schedule the meeting, and then conduct the meeting. And then during the meeting, the case conference committee, which includes the school administrators, the school psychologist, sometimes the school counselor, the special education teacher, the parents, a general education teacher, and then sometimes, if the student's old enough, the student themselves. The case conference committee will review all of the necessary information and determine whether or not the student is necessarily eligible for special ed services. If the student is eligible, then they will develop an IEP based upon the student's needs. However, if the case conference committee determines that the student might not necessarily have the amount of disabilities or issues that require a special ed IEP, they may offer a 504, which is not as intense as an IEP, but it does provide services and supports in accommodations. It just doesn't provide progress monitoring or goals for the student. So what is a reevaluation conference? Well, the reevaluation is a conference in which the school, as well as the parents, meet to determine continued, additional, or different areas of eligibility for services, or consider additional student data, review evidence of student progress, review IEP goals, present proposed IEP goals, and develop a complete and compliant IEP. Now, reevaluations are important because I'm a living, breathing example of one. So when I was younger, I was diagnosed as mildly mentally handicapped, which means that I would most likely not be able to graduate from high school. I would end up with a certificate of completion. However, I did graduate from the top 10% of my class with a high school diploma, and I went on to get my bachelor's and my master's degree. But that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have a reevaluation conference. And those reevaluation conferences, they're supposed to happen every 3 years. However, here in Indiana, lawmakers have really pushed for special education teachers to discuss reevaluation conferences every year at the annual case conference. And the reason for this, as I said, was to update the information, because in my case, they determined that my disability wasn't as severe as they originally thought. The more help and support that I got, the lower my disability was. So instead of mildly mentally handicapped, I was listed as having a specific learning disability in reading and mathematics. But if I hadn't had that reevaluation conference, I would still be labeled as MMIH. So it's important for individuals to have reevaluation case conferences. And parents can request reevaluation case conferences at any point throughout the year. Now, you may be wondering, well, I've heard of reevaluation case conferences, but there's another one, isn't there? Isn't it called a revision conference? Well, that is true. Revision conferences are different from reevaluation conferences, though. And that's what we're going to be talking about in next week's video. So if you liked what you saw, you found it interesting, or you're new to the channel, please click the like button. And if you want updates on future videos, feel free to click the subscribe button and ring the bell for updates on future videos. And as always, if you have questions or comments, or there's a particular topic in special education that you're confused about and you would like me to go over, please drop a line in the comments section and I would be happy to help. And until next time, class dismissed.